The night was quiet in the small town of Baker, Nevada. Daniel Cole was working alone in his repair shop, fixing an old truck that belonged to a farmer from down the road. He was 32 years old, had rough hands from years of hard work, and lived a simple life. He never expected anything strange to happen to him. He was just a mechanic, nobody special. But that night everything changed. Daniel heard a low hum coming from outside. At first, he thought it was a plane flying too low. He wiped his hands on a dirty rag and walked to the open garage door. What he saw made his heart stop. The sky was splitting open. A line of bright purple light cut through the darkness like a wound. The hum grew louder, shaking the ground beneath his feet. Daniel tried to run, but his legs would not move. His whole body was frozen. He could only watch as a massive ship descended from the tier in the sky. It was not like anything he had seen in movies or books. It was alive. The surface of the ship moved and pulsed like the skin of some giant creature. A beam of light shot down and wrapped around Daniel. He felt his body lift off the ground. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The world went dark. When Daniel woke up, he was lying on a cold floor. The air smelled wrong, like metal and something bitter he could not name. He opened his eyes slowly and saw walls that glowed with soft blue light. The walls were not made of metal or stone. They looked like they were made of crystal, but they moved slightly, like they were breathing. Daniel sat up and looked around. He was in a small room with no door that he could see. Through the crystal walls he could see other rooms, other cells. Inside them were creatures. Some had too many arms. Some had no eyes. Some looked like insects the size of horses. All of them were watching him. A section of the wall slid open and two guards walked in. They were tall, almost 8 feet, with bodies covered in hard black shells. They had 4 arms and heads shaped like those of praying mantises. Their eyes were large and dark, showing no emotion. The guards grabbed Daniel by the arms and dragged him out of the cell. He tried to fight, but they were too strong. It was like trying to push against a truck. They pulled him through long hallways filled with that same strange blue light. Other creatures moved out of the way when they saw the guards coming. Everyone looked afraid. Finally, they reached a massive door that opened on its own. The guards threw Daniel inside and he fell hard on the floor. When he looked up, he saw the biggest room he had ever been in. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. The walls were covered with patterns that seemed to move and change. And at the far end of the room, on a throne made of something that looked like bone and shell, sat the queen. She was terrifying. Her body was like that of a giant insect, but her upper half was almost human in shape. She had 6 legs, 4 arms, and a face with large compound eyes that reflected Daniel 1,000 times over. Her skin was dark green, and her head was crowned with sharp, curved horns. She wore no clothes, but her body was covered in natural armor that looked harder than steel. Queen, ruler of the empire, conqueror of 37 worlds. She rose from her throne and walked toward Daniel. Each step of her 6 legs made a clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. Other creatures in the room, advisors and guards, stepped back to give her space. All of them watched Daniel with a mix of curiosity and disgust. The queen stopped just a few feet away from him. She was so tall that Daniel had to look almost straight up to see her face. Her compound eyes studied him like he was a bug under a microscope. "So," she said, her voice coming from a device on her chest that translated her words into English, "this is a human." Daniel's mouth was dry. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. But something inside him, some stubborn part that had helped him survive a hard life, pushed him to speak. "What do you want from me?" he asked. His voice shook, but he did not look away from her eyes. The queen tilted her head slightly. The other creatures in the room whispered to each other. No one spoke to the queen like that. No one asked her questions. They only answered hers. "Interesting," the queen said. "You are afraid. I can smell it on you, and yet you speak." She began to circle around him, her legs clicking on the floor. Daniel forced himself to stay still, even though every part of him wanted to run. "Your planet is small," the Queen continued. "Your species is young. You have only just discovered how to leave your own solar system. By all measures, you are nothing, weak, primitive, unimportant." She stopped in front of him again and leaned down until her face was close to his. Her breath was cold, and it smelled like something ancient. "And yet," she whispered, "your kind has survived things that have destroyed greater species. Ice ages, plagues, wars that killed millions of your own people, disasters that should have ended you, but you are still here." Daniel did not know what to say. He had never thought about humanity that way. He had always thought of people as fragile, easy to hurt, easy to kill. The Queen straightened up and turned to face her court. "I have studied 43 intelligent species across this galaxy. Many of them had technology far beyond what humans have now. Many of them had bodies stronger and minds faster, and many of them are now dust." She looked back at Daniel. "I want to know what makes your kind different. I want to know why humans refuse to die." One of the advisors, a creature with a body like a snake and a head like a wolf, stepped forward. "My Queen, with respect, this creature is worthless. Humans have nothing to offer us. We should add their planet to the Empire and be done with it." The Queen did not look at the advisor. She kept her eyes on Daniel. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps there is something in this small, weak creature that we have forgotten, something that our Empire needs." She raised one of her clawed hands and touched Daniel's chin, lifting his face toward hers. "You will stay here human," she said. "You will be tested, and if you survive, you may yet prove that your species is worth more than slaves and soldiers." Daniel swallowed hard. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he understood one thing: his life was no longer his own. He was now property of the Empire, a subject of their Queen, and his survival depended on proving that humanity was worth something to creatures who saw themselves as gods. As the guards dragged him away to wherever they kept their test subjects, Daniel made himself a silent promise. He would survive. He would learn. And somehow, someway, he would find a way to get home. He did not know it yet, but that promise would change the fate of the entire galaxy. The first test came on the second day. Daniel was taken from his cell to a large arena deep inside the hive ship. The walls were made of the same living crystal he had seen everywhere, but here they were darker, stained with something that might have been blood. The floor was covered with sand, and the air smelled like sweat and fear. Queen watched from a platform high above, surrounded by her advisors. Hundreds of other creatures filled the seats around the arena, all of them eager to see what would happen to the human. A gate on the other side of the arena opened and a warrior walked out. He was from a species Daniel had never seen before. He stood about 7 feet tall, with gray skin covered in thick scales. His arms were as big as Daniel's entire body, and his hands ended in claws that looked like they could cut through metal. The creature carried no weapon. He did not need one. "Fight," the Queen's voice echoed through the arena. "Survive." Daniel looked around for something, anything he could use. There was nothing, just sand and the walls and the monster walking toward him. The first punch came so fast that Daniel barely saw it. It hit him in the chest and sent him flying across the arena. He crashed into the wall and fell to the ground, gasping for air. His ribs felt like they were on fire. The crowd laughed. Some of them cheered for the gray creature to finish the job. Daniel pushed himself up on shaking arms. The creature was walking toward him slowly, enjoying the moment. It knew it had already won. This was just entertainment now. But Daniel had grown up in a rough neighborhood. He had been in fights before. He had lost most of them, but he had learned one important thing. The fight is not over until you stop getting up. He got up. The creature's eyes showed something like surprise. It had expected the human to stay down. Most species did after a hit like that. Daniel did not try to fight the creature head-on. He knew he would lose. Instead, he watched. He studied how the creature moved, where it put its weight, how it threw its punches. And when the creature swung again, Daniel was ready. He ducked under the blow and ran past, putting distance between them. The fight lasted 20 minutes. Daniel took more hits than he could count. His nose was broken. His left eye was swollen shut. 2 of his ribs were cracked. But he kept moving, kept dodging, kept learning. And slowly he began to see patterns. The creature always stepped with its left foot before a big swing. It always paused for half a second after missing. On one of those pauses, Daniel grabbed a handful of sand and threw it in the creature's eyes. As it roared in anger and swung blindly, Daniel slipped behind it and jumped onto its back. He wrapped his arms around its thick neck and squeezed with everything he had. The creature thrashed and tried to grab him, but Daniel held on. His muscles screamed. His vision was going dark from the pain, but he did not let go. After what felt like forever, the creature fell to its knees. A few seconds later, it collapsed face first into the sand, unconscious. The arena went silent. Daniel rolled off the creature's back and lay on the ground, staring up at the ceiling. He could barely breathe. Every part of his body was in pain, but he was alive. From her platform, Queen leaned forward. Her compound eyes reflected the image of the broken, bloody human lying in the sand. She had seen warriors from mighty species fall in that arena. She had seen champions give up after one defeat. But this weak, fragile creature had won through stubbornness alone. "Interesting," she said softly. Over the next 6 months, the tests continued. They put Daniel in rooms that were so cold his skin turned blue. He shivered and shook and thought he would die, but his body adjusted. He survived. They put him in rooms that were so hot the air burned his lungs. He sweated and suffered and nearly passed out, but his body adjusted. He survived. They exposed him to atmospheres that should have poisoned him. They starved him. They deprived him of sleep. Every test was designed to find the breaking point of the human body and mind. Daniel broke many times, but he always put himself back together. The Queen observed every test. She took notes. She asked questions. She became fascinated with the way Daniel's body could heal from injuries that would have killed members of other species. She was amazed by how his mind could adapt to challenges it had never faced before. One day she gave him a puzzle. It was a complex system of shapes and colors, designed for a species with 3 brains and perfect memory. Daniel had neither of those things. He failed the puzzle completely on his first attempt. But he did not give up. He came back to it the next day and tried again. He failed again. He came back the day after that, and the day after that. On the 7th day, he solved it, not the way it was meant to be solved. He had created his own method, a shortcut that the puzzle makers had never imagined. It was crude, but it worked. The scientist who had designed the puzzle was furious. "He cheated," the scientist said to the Queen. "This is not a valid solution." "He found a way to win with a brain that should not have been capable of winning," the Queen replied. "That is not cheating, that is adaptation." Not everyone was impressed by Daniel's survival. Lord, the Queen's military advisor, watched the human with growing anger. Was a pure, born from the oldest bloodlines, and he believed in the superiority of his species above all others. "This creature is a threat," told the Queen one evening. "His species learns too quickly. They adapt too fast. If we allow them to grow, they will become a danger to our empire." "Then perhaps we should make them our allies instead of our enemies," the Queen said. His eyes went wide with shock. "Allies with primitives? My Queen, this is madness." "The empire has grown through conquest for 10,000 years, the Queen said. "And where has it brought us? We are powerful, yes, but we are also dying. We clone our soldiers because we have forgotten how to raise them. We manufacture our food because we have forgotten how to grow it. We have conquered so much that we have forgotten how to create anything new." She looked at with eyes that had seen centuries of war. Humans are different, they struggle, they fail, they suffer, and somehow that makes them stronger. I want to understand how. Bowed his head, but his eyes were full of hate. He would not forget this conversation. He would not forgive it. That night, the queen summoned Daniel to her private chambers. It was the first time any non had ever been granted such an honor. Daniel walked through doors that opened at the queen's mental command and entered a room filled with soft light and the scent of strange flowers. The queen sat by a window that looked out into space. Stars stretched across the darkness like diamonds on black cloth. "Do you know why I brought you here, human?" she asked. Daniel stood straight, hiding his nervousness. "To study me, to learn about my species." "Partly," the queen admitted. "But there is more." She turned to face him. "I am dying, Daniel Cole, not today, not tomorrow, but the poison is in my empire. We are rotting from the inside, and no amount of conquest can cure that disease." She rose and walked toward him. "Your people have something we have lost. You have hope. Irrational, impossible hope. You face death and destruction, and somehow you believe that tomorrow will be better. I need to understand that. I need to know if it can be taught." Daniel looked at the queen, at this terrifying creature who ruled over billions of lives, and for the first time, he saw something familiar in her eyes. She was afraid, just like him. "I do not know if hope can be taught," Daniel said honestly, "but I can tell you where it comes from." The queen tilted her head. "Where?" Daniel thought of his home, his world, all the people he had left behind. "It comes from having something worth fighting for," he said, "and from believing that the fight matters even if you lose." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Then perhaps," she said, "you can teach me what is worth fighting for." It was the beginning of something neither of them expected, and it would change everything. The announcement shook the entire empire. Queen stood before the Grand Council, a gathering of the most powerful lords and advisors from across her conquered territories. Behind her, displayed on a massive screen, was a hologram of Daniel Cole, the human who had become the talk of every hive ship and colony world. "I have made my decision," the queen declared. Her voice echoed through the chamber, silencing the whispers. "The human Daniel Cole will serve as my personal advisor. He will speak with my authority on matters of strategy and diplomacy, and in time, he will stand beside me as my consort." The chamber exploded. Lord was the first to rise, his 4 arms spread wide in disbelief. "This is an insult to our entire species," he roared. "A human, a primitive creature from a world we have not even bothered to conquer. You would place him above the lords of the—" Other voices joined him. The council was a storm of anger and outrage. Species that had served the empire for centuries demanded to know why a human deserved such honor. Military commanders questioned the queen's judgment. Some even questioned her sanity. But Queen stood calm through all of it. She let them shout until their voices grew tired. Then she raised one hand and the chamber fell silent. "You ask why I choose this human," she said. "Let me tell you. In 6 months, Daniel Cole has survived tests that have killed warriors from species you consider your equals. He has adapted to conditions that would have destroyed most of you. He has solved puzzles designed for minds far greater than his own. And he has done all of this with a body so fragile that any one of you could break it with a single blow." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That is strength," she continued. "Not the strength of muscles or claws or weapons, the strength to refuse defeat, the strength to rise after every fall. That is what humanity has, and that is what our empire needs." The council was silent now, but the anger had not faded. It had simply gone underground, waiting for the right moment to surface again. Lord bowed his head in false respect. "As you command, my queen," he said. But his eyes were cold, and Daniel, watching from a side chamber, knew that this was not over. The queen turned to face the screen where Daniel's image was displayed. "As for the human's world," she said, Earth will be placed under my personal protection. It will not be conquered. It will not be harvested. Its people will be offered membership in the empire as partners, not slaves. This time the council did not shout. They were too stunned. In 10,000 years of history, no species had ever been offered partnership. There were only rulers and subjects, conquerors and conquered. Queen had just rewritten the rules. Daniel was given quarters near the Queen's own chambers. They were simple by standards, but to Daniel, they were the most comfortable rooms he had ever seen. Soft beds that adjusted to his body, windows that showed real-time views of space, food that was prepared specifically for human nutrition. But he did not let the comfort make him soft. He knew he was in danger. Half the court wanted him dead, and the other half wanted to use him for their own purposes. So he worked. He studied the language until he could speak it without a translator. He learned the history of the empire, the politics of the court, the tensions between different species. He observed everything and forgot nothing. And slowly, he began to make changes. It started small. The Queen brought him to a council meeting about a rebellious colony on the edge of the empire. The military advisors wanted to send a fleet to crush the rebellion. They had done it 100 times before. It was the way. Daniel asked for permission to speak. The advisors laughed, but the Queen nodded. The colony is rebelling because they are starving, Daniel said. Your empire taxes them too heavily. If you send a fleet, you will win. But you will have to leave soldiers there to keep the peace. That costs more than the taxes you collect, and in 10 years they will rebel again. The advisors scoffed. What would you suggest, human, that we reward rebellion with kindness? I suggest you reduce their taxes by half and offer them a trade agreement, Daniel replied. Let them keep more of what they produce, and they will produce more. You will collect less from each one, but you will collect from more of them, and they will have no reason to rebel. The council rejected the idea, but the Queen ordered it done anyway. 3 months later, the colony was not only peaceful but thriving. Tax revenues had actually increased, and other rebellious colonies began sending messages to the Queen, asking for similar arrangements. Daniel's reputation grew. The conquered species of the empire began to see him as a symbol of something they had never dared to imagine, the possibility of change. If a human could rise to stand beside the Queen, what might they achieve? Lord watched all of this with growing fury. He gathered other traditionalists around him, lords and generals who believed the old ways were the only ways. They met in secret and spoke of what needed to be done. The Queen is being manipulated, told his followers. The human has poisoned her mind with his primitive ideas. If we do not act, he will destroy everything our ancestors built. One of the generals, a veteran of 100 campaigns, asked the question they were all thinking. What do you propose, Lord? His mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile. We wait, we watch, and when the moment is right, we remind the empire why the rule. While plotted, Daniel continued his work. He spent long hours with the Queen, teaching her about human history. She was fascinated by the stories of revolutions, of people rising up against tyrants, of empires that fell and were replaced by something new. Your species destroys its own leaders, she observed one evening. They were sitting in her private chambers, watching a recording of Earth's history that Daniel had asked to be retrieved from human databases. Kings, emperors, presidents, you tear them down and build new ones. Daniel nodded. We are not very good at accepting that things cannot change, he admitted. Sometimes we make things worse, but sometimes we make them better. And you consider this progress? Daniel thought about the question carefully. Progress is not always moving forward, he said. Sometimes it is falling down and getting back up. Sometimes it is making mistakes and learning from them. But yes, I think it is progress, because we keep trying. We never accept that this is as good as it gets. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised Daniel. "I have ruled for 300 years. In all that time, I have never questioned whether my rule was good. I only asked whether it was strong. You have made me question everything." Daniel met her eyes. "Is that a bad thing?" The queen's mandibles clicked softly. "I do not know yet, but I suspect it is not." She reached out and touched his hand with one of her clawed fingers. It was a gentle touch, almost human. "You have changed me, Daniel Cole," she said. "I do not know if my people will thank you or curse you for it, but I am grateful." Daniel felt something shift inside him. When he had first arrived on this ship, he had seen the queen as a monster. Now he saw something else, a ruler struggling with the weight of her crown, a person looking for something she had lost long ago. He closed his hand around her finger. "Then let us find out together," he said. Outside the chamber, the stars continued their endless dance, and somewhere in the darkness of the ship, Lord made his final preparations. The storm was coming, and nothing in the galaxy would be the same after it passed. The attack came at midnight ship time. Daniel was in his quarters when the first explosions shook the vessel. Alarms screamed through the corridors. The lights flickered and turned red. He grabbed the weapon he had been given months ago, a blade that felt too heavy in his human hands, and ran toward the queen's chambers. The hallways were chaos. Soldiers fought soldiers. Some wore the queen's colors. Others wore the black markings of Lord's loyalists. Bodies lay on the floor and other species alike, their blood mixing on the crystal tiles. Daniel pushed through the fighting. A loyalist soldier spotted him and raised a weapon, but Daniel ducked under the blast and drove his blade into the soldier's side. He did not stop to see if the soldier fell. There was no time. He reached the queen's chambers to find the doors blown open. Inside, a battle was already raging. Queen stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of her personal guards. They were holding off waves of attackers, but they were losing. For every loyalist they killed, 2 more took its place. The queen was fighting too. Despite her size, she moved with deadly speed. Her claws tore through armor like paper. Her tail struck with enough force to shatter bones. But she was wounded. Daniel could see green blood running down her side where a blade had found its mark. Daniel charged into the fight. He was not as strong as he was not as fast, but he was there, and that was what mattered. He fought beside the queen's guards, blocking strikes that would have killed them, striking at enemies who did not expect a human to be a threat. Lord entered the chamber like a storm. He was massive, even for and his body was covered in the scars of 100 battles. In his upper hands, he carried 2 curved blades that glowed with energy. In his lower hands, he carried a weapon that Daniel did not recognize, something that hummed with terrible power. "Your reign ends tonight," roared. "The Empire will remember you as the queen who forgot her duty, the queen who let a human whisper poison in her ear." The queen's guards moved to intercept, but he cut through them like they were made of paper. One by one, they fell. Within seconds, only the queen and Daniel remained standing. Raised his strange weapon and fired. The beam struck the queen in the chest and sent her crashing against the wall. She tried to rise, but her movements were slow, weak. The weapon had done something to her, something that was draining her strength. "Poison," said with satisfaction. "A slow-acting toxin designed for your bloodline. You will live long enough to see your precious human die. Then you will follow." He turned toward Daniel, his compound eyes filled with contempt. "I will enjoy this," he said. "The creature who thought it could change an empire, killed by the empire's true champion." Daniel raised his blade. His arms were shaking. His body was covered in cuts and bruises from the fight. He knew he could not win this battle, was faster, stronger, and more experienced than anyone Daniel had ever faced. But he remembered something the queen had asked him months ago. Where does hope come from? It comes from having something worth fighting for. Daniel attacked. Blocked his first strike with ease. The second, the third. He was playing with Daniel, letting the human exhaust himself before delivering the killing blow. But Daniel did not stop. Every time knocked him down, he got back up. Every time cut him, he kept coming. Blood ran down his face, his arms, his chest. His vision was blurring. His legs were barely holding him up. And still he fought. Something changed in the room. The loyalist soldiers who had been watching the fight began to shift uncomfortably. They had conquered species across the galaxy. They had seen warriors surrender after a single defeat. They had never seen anything like this. A creature with no chance of winning, fighting as if victory was certain. Queen watched from where she lay against the wall. The poison was spreading through her body, shutting down her systems one by one. But she had enough strength left to reach the communication console built into the wall beside her. She activated it. Her voice, weak but clear, broadcast across every ship in her fleet, every colony, every station, every corner of her empire. "My people," she said, "I am your queen. What you are seeing now is a coup by Lord and those who believe the old ways are the only ways." She paused, fighting against the poison that wanted to silence her. "I have ruled through fear," she continued. "I have conquered because I believed strength was the only path to survival, but I was wrong. True strength is not the ability to destroy. It is the ability to endure, to adapt, to hope when hope seems foolish." She looked at Daniel, still fighting, still refusing to fall. "I learned this from a human," she said. "A creature from a small world on the edge of the galaxy. He has no great strength, no special powers. He is fragile and mortal and should have died 100 times over. But he will not stop fighting. He will not give up. And that is a kind of strength that our empire has forgotten." Her voice grew stronger, drawing on reserves she did not know she had. "I am dying," she said. "Poison is in my blood. I may not survive this night, but before I go, I offer you a choice. You can follow and return to the old ways, conquest, slavery, fear. Or you can build something new, something better, a future where species work together instead of serving under a single claw." She took a breath that rattled in her chest. "Choose wisely, my people. For the choice you make tonight will determine the fate of this galaxy for generations to come." The broadcast ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, across the empire, ships began to turn. Captains who had been loyal to the old ways looked at each other and saw the same doubt in their eyes. Was this really what they wanted? More war, more conquest, more of the same. One ship declared for the Queen, then another, then a dozen, then 100. In the throne room, heard the reports coming through his communicator. His face twisted with rage. "Traitors," he snarled, "all of them traitors." He turned back to Daniel, who was still standing barely, his blade raised. "It does not matter," said. "The Queen is dying, you are dying, and when you are both gone, I will bring the fleet back into line." Daniel smiled through the blood on his face. "You still do not understand," he said. "This was never about winning. It was about showing people that there is another way, and now they have seen it." Roared and charged. But before he could reach Daniel, the doors of the chamber burst open. Soldiers poured in, but not soldiers. These wore the Queen's colors. They had seen the broadcast. They had made their choice. Fought like a demon, but he was outnumbered. One by one, his blades were knocked from his hands. One by one, his guards were cut down. And finally, the great lord, champion of the old empire, fell to his knees in defeat. Daniel collapsed beside the Queen. He reached for her hand and found it cold. "Did we win?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The Queen's compound eyes, dimming but not yet dark, found his face. "Yes," she said, "I think we did." Outside the ship, the fleet that had been tearing itself apart began to go still. The coup was over. The war was over. But the real work was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the night of the coup. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have imagined. The empire, which had ruled through fear and conquest for 10,000 years, was now the Confederation. Instead of one queen commanding all, there were councils representing each member species. Instead of slaves, there were citizens. Instead of subjects, there were partners. It had not been easy. The first year was the hardest. Old habits died slowly, and many in the former empire did not want to give up their power. There were smaller rebellions, assassination attempts, and moments when it seemed like everything would fall apart. But it held together. Somehow, against all odds, it held together. Earth had joined the Confederation in the third year. Human ambassadors now served on councils across the galaxy. Human scientists worked alongside aliens who had been studying the stars for. Human soldiers trained with warriors from a dozen different species, learning from them and teaching them in return. The humans brought something to the Confederation that it had desperately needed: fresh eyes. They looked at problems that had existed for centuries and asked simple questions that no one had thought to ask. They proposed solutions that seemed foolish until they worked. They failed often, but they learned from their failures and tried again. Most importantly, they refused to accept that anything was impossible. Daniel Cole stood on the observation deck of the Queen's flagship, watching a nebula paint the void in shades of red and gold. He was older now, 37 years old, with gray showing in his hair and scars showing on his body. He had fought in battles he never could have imagined when he was just a mechanic in Nevada. He had helped reshape the political structure of an entire galaxy. And he was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind of tired that came from carrying too much weight for too long. He had never asked for any of this. He had never wanted to be a symbol or a hero. He had just wanted to survive. But somewhere along the way, survival had turned into something more. He heard the familiar clicking of legs on the deck behind him. He did not need to turn to know who it was. Queen walked up to stand beside him. She moved more slowly now than she once had. The poison from his blade had never fully left her system. The doctors said she had perhaps 20 years left, maybe less. For a species that could live for 500 years, it was a death sentence. She did not seem to mind. "You are thinking again," she said. "I can always tell when you are thinking. Your face does that strange thing." Daniel smiled. "What strange thing?" "It gets all tight and wrinkled, like you are trying to squeeze your thoughts out through your skin." "That is not a thing faces do." "Human faces do. I have been studying them for 5 years now. I am an expert." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. It was something they did often now. No need for words, just presence. After a while, the Queen spoke again. Her voice was softer now, carrying a weight that Daniel had come to recognize. "Do you still remember why I chose you?" she asked. Daniel thought about the question. He remembered waking up in that cell, terrified and alone. He remembered being dragged before the throne. He remembered the tests, the pain, the moments when he had wanted to give up. "Because I was convenient," he said. "Wrong place, wrong time." The Queen made a clicking sound that Daniel had learned was laughter. "No, that is not why." She turned to face him fully. Her compound eyes, still bright despite her illness, reflected the glow of the nebula. "I chose you because when I looked into your eyes that first night, I saw something I had not seen in centuries. Not fear, not submission. I saw defiance. I saw a creature who would rather die than accept that his fate was not his own." She reached out and touched his face with one of her clawed hands. It was a gesture that would have been unthinkable years ago. Now it was as natural as breathing. "I chose you because you reminded me of what my people used to be," she said. "Before we conquered so much that we forgot why we were conquering. Before we became so powerful that we forgot what power was for." Daniel placed his hand over hers. Her skin was cool and rough, so different from human skin, but it felt right. "You gave humanity a future," he said. "A place among the stars. That is a debt we can never repay." The queen shook her head. You gave me something more valuable. You gave me hope. She turned back to the window, but she kept her hand on his face. I was dying before I met you, she said. Not physically, not then, but inside. I had ruled for 300 years and I had forgotten what it felt like to believe in something. I went through the motions of being a queen, but there was nothing behind them, just emptiness. She paused, and Daniel saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. It took him a moment to recognize it. Peace. You showed me that it was not too late to change, she continued. That the past does not have to determine the future. That even an old queen can learn new ways of being. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You did most of the work, he said. I just asked questions. The right questions, she replied. Asked at the right time. That is a kind of power that no weapon can match. They stood together as the ship sailed on through the endless dark. Behind them, a confederation of species worked to build something better than any empire could have achieved through conquest alone. It was messy. It was difficult. It was full of arguments and setbacks and moments of doubt. But it was alive. It was growing. It was hope made real. What happens now? Daniel asked. The queen considered the question. Now we keep going. We make mistakes and fix them. We take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We argue and compromise and sometimes get it wrong. She looked at him with something that might have been a smile. That is what you taught me, Daniel Cole. That progress is not a straight line. It is a struggle, a constant fight against the easy path, and it is worth every moment of pain. She released his face and turned toward the door. Come, she said. The council is meeting in an hour. The representatives from Earth want to propose a new trade agreement, and the lords want to complain about it. You should be there to help me navigate the argument. Daniel laughed. Some things never change. No, the queen agreed, but some things do, and that is enough. She walked toward the door, her 6 legs clicking a rhythm that Daniel knew as well as his own heartbeat. Daniel took one last look at the nebula. Somewhere out there, beyond the red and gold clouds, was Earth, his home, a small blue world that had seemed so unimportant just 5 years ago. Now it was part of something greater, and so was he. He followed the queen out of the observation deck and into the bright corridors of the ship. There was work to do, arguments to settle, problems to solve, a galaxy to help build. It was not the life he had expected. But as he walked beside the alien queen who had become his partner, his friend, and something more, Daniel Cole realized that it was the life he had chosen. And he would not trade it for anything in the universe. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, the story of the human who stood beside a queen had become legend. Children of 100 species grew up hearing the tale. They learned that strength was not just about power. They learned that hope was not just a feeling. They learned that even the smallest and strangest beginnings could lead to the greatest of destinies. And on a small blue planet called Earth, a new generation looked up at the stars and dreamed of what they might become. The future was waiting, and humanity was ready.